The air in the maintenance corridor was always cold. Gene pulled his gray work jacket tighter as he walked. The metal floor rang softly under his boots. Around him, the ship called Ignis hummed. It was a deep, quiet sound he felt in his bones. Pipes and wires ran along the walls. Lights glowed a steady blue. It was a familiar sight. He had walked this path 1,000 times. Gene was a systems technician. His job was to fix things that broke. It was quiet work. He liked it that way. He was a tall man with a face that looked tired. His black hair was cut short. His hands had many small scars from tools and wires. He had been a soldier once. That was a long time ago. Now he preferred the hum of machines to the sound of guns. His data slate buzzed on his belt. He took it out. The message was short. It was from the command deck. It said, "Technician Gene. Report to Commander Sora immediately." Jin's stomach felt tight. He had not been called to the command deck in over a year. He tried to think of what he had done wrong. He checked his work reports in his mind. All systems were good. All tasks were done. He could not think of a mistake. But a call from the commander was never for a good thing. He put the slate away. He turned and walked toward the central lift. Other crew members passed him. Some were human, like him. Many were not. He saw a tall being with smooth green skin. He saw a short creature with 4 arms carrying a heavy box. No one spoke to him. He did not speak to them. He kept his eyes forward and walked. The command deck was at the heart of the ship. The lift doors opened. Gene stepped out into a wide room. The light here was brighter. Screens covered the walls. They showed stars and maps and numbers. The crew here sat in chairs, talking softly. They all wore neat uniforms. Gene felt out of place in his dirty work clothes. In the center of the room stood Commander Sora. The commander was not human. They were draconian. They stood on 2 powerful legs, taller than any human. Their body was covered in scales the color of dark copper. A long tail rested on the floor behind them. It moved slowly, like a sleepy cat's. They wore a simple black harness, not a uniform. Their wings were folded tightly against their back. Their face was long with a sharp jaw. 2 black horns curved back from their head. Their eyes were large and golden, with a thin black line for a pupil. Gene walked toward them. He stopped a few steps away. He stood straight. He did not bow. Draconians did not like bowing. They saw it as a sign of weakness. "Technician Gene," Sora said. Their voice was low. It was not loud, but it filled the quiet room. Everyone on the deck stopped talking. All Gene could hear was the hum of the ship and Sora's voice. "Commander," Gene said. He kept his own voice calm. Sora looked at him. Their golden eyes did not blink. "You were on the ship last night during the quiet cycle," Sora said. It was not a question. "Yes," Gene said. He had been. He had a pass for it. Technicians often worked odd hours. "You visited the observation blister on Deck Gamma," Sora said. The tail gave one slow flick. The scales made a soft sound like dry leaves. Jin's heart beat faster. He had been there. It was a private thing. He did not think anyone knew. "I did," he said. He saw no reason to lie. Sora took a step closer. Gene could feel the heat coming from their body. Draconians were always warm. "You forgot something," Sora said. The words hung in the air. Jin's mind raced. What had he left? He remembered his small bag. He had taken everything. His flask. His data slate. He was sure of it. He was always careful. He cleaned up after himself. "I do not think so, Commander," Gene said, trying to sound sure. Sora's head tilted. The light gleamed on their copper scales. "You are wrong. My ship sensors are never wrong. An object remains. You left it on the bench. You will go and retrieve it. Now." Gene felt a cold worry. Leaving something behind was a small thing. But on Sora's ship, nothing was small. Sora was known for their rules. Their ship was clean and perfect. A forgotten tool was a mark against the whole crew. A mark against Gene. "I understand," Gene said. He would go. He would find this thing, this mistake, and bring it back. Maybe then the punishment would be light. But Sora was not done. "This is my ship," they said, their voice a quiet rumble. Every being on the deck was listening. "Everything that happens here I know. Everything that is left here is my concern. You will go to Deck Gamma. You will find what you forgot. And you will bring it to me. Do you understand?" "Yes, Commander," Jean said. "Good." Sora turned their head away. The talk was over. Jean was dismissed. Jean turned and walked back to the lift. He felt the eyes of the crew on his back. He heard the soft whispers start again behind him. His face was warm with shame. He stepped into the lift and pressed the button for Deck Gamma. The doors closed. He was alone again. He leaned against the wall of the lift. He closed his eyes. What had he left? What mistake had he made? And why did the commander care about a single forgotten thing so much? The lift moved down. The hum of the ship was the only sound. Jean opened his eyes. He would find the object. He would face whatever came next. He was a veteran. He had faced worse than a dragon's displeasure. But in his heart, a small, sad memory stirred. Last night was not about work. Last night was about Day. He pushed the thought away. This was not the time for memories. This was a time for fixing a mistake. The lift doors opened. Deck Gamma was quiet and dark. Only the safety lights were on. He walked toward the observation blister. His boots were the only sound in the empty hall. The walk to the observation blister was long. Deck Gamma was not a place for machines or crew quarters. It was a quiet part of the ship. The halls were plain. The blue safety lights made long shadows. Jin's footsteps echoed. It was a lonely sound. His mind would not be quiet. Kept going back. Back to last night. Back to Day. He remembered a different walk. A walk in the heat of a Korean summer. The air was thick and warm. Cicadas sang in the trees. He was young, maybe 19. Day was walking beside him. They were on a dirt path near their hometown. The mountains were green in the distance. Day was laughing. He had a loud, easy laugh. He was shorter than Jean, but stronger. He always seemed to be moving. "The city will be boring," Day said, kicking a stone. "But the stars, Jean. We will see them. For real." They had just signed their papers for the coalition. They were going to be mechanics. They would fix starship engines. It was a good job. It was a way out. A way to see everything. "We will stick together," Jean said. It was a promise. "Of course," Day said, slapping his back. "You are my brother. Where I go, you go." The memory faded. The cold hall of the Ignis came back. Jean passed a closed door. A sign said, "Storage." Everything was metal and silent. Another memory came. This one was not warm. It was cold and loud. He was on a different ship. A smaller, older ship called the Gantry. It was not a clean carrier. It was a patrol ship. The air smelled of oil and old food. An alarm was screaming. Red lights flashed. He was in a narrow hallway. Sparks flew from a broken panel. The ship was shaking. Pirates were attacking. They were trying to board. "Jean! Here!" It was Day's voice. He was down the hall. He was wearing a heavy repair suit. His face behind the clear shield was tight with fear. Jean ran to him. They were supposed to seal the inner hull doors. The pirates had blasted a hole in the outer hull on Deck 2. If they did not seal the doors, the air would all rush out. Everyone on that deck would die. They worked fast. Their hands were steady from practice. They pulled the emergency levers. The big metal doors began to close. They were slow. Too slow. A terrible sound came from around the corner. It was the sound of metal tearing. It was the sound of air screaming into space. The breach was getting bigger. "Go!" Day shouted. He pointed back the way Jean came. "Get to the safe zone. Seal the door behind you." "Not without you," Jean yelled. The wind was pulling at him. Tools were flying past his head. "I have to manual lock this one. It's stuck." Day was already turning. He was not looking at Jean. He was looking at the broken door mechanism. "Go." "That's an order." They were the same rank. He could not give orders. But Jean knew he was right. Someone had to do it. If no one manual locked the door, The seal would not hold. The whole section would be lost. Jin's feet moved. He ran back. He hit the button for the last safety door. It slid closed behind him. He turned just in time to see through the small window. Day got the lock in place. The big hull door slammed shut. The seal was tight. The screaming wind stopped. But Day was on the wrong side. The outer wall behind him groaned. Then it broke. There was no sound in the vacuum. Jean saw his friend for one last second. Day looked at him through the window. He was not afraid anymore. He looked calm. Then he was gone. The memory was a knife in Jin's chest. He stopped walking. He was in the cold hall on the Ignis. He put a hand on the cold wall. He breathed in and out. He did this often. The memory never got easier. It just got more familiar. Last night was the anniversary. 5 years. He had come to this observation blister because it was quiet. It looked out at the stars. He thought it was a good place to remember. He had brought a small, flat flask of soju. He had brought his data slate. He had sat on the bench. He lit a digital candle on the screen. The soft light glowed on his face. He poured a little soju on the floor for Day. He drank a little for himself. He talked. He talked about the mountains back home. He talked about Day's loud laugh. He said he was sorry. He said it many times. He sat there for a long time. When he left, he was sure he took everything. The flask was in his pocket. The slate was in his hand. He had checked the bench. It was empty. Jean started walking again. The door to the observation blister was ahead. It was a round door. He pressed his hand to the panel. It slid open. The room was a dome of clear material. The stars were right there. A blanket of black with thousands of sharp, bright points. A slow-moving nebula, like a purple cloud, filled half the view. It was beautiful. It was always beautiful. He looked at the bench. It was a simple curve of metal, fixed to the floor. There was nothing on it. He stepped closer. He looked on the floor under it. He saw nothing. His confusion grew. Had the commander made a mistake? Was this a test? He felt a flicker of anger. Was he being played with? He walked all around the small room. He saw no tool, no datapad, no piece of cloth. The room was perfectly clean. Just stars and silence. He was about to turn and leave. To go back and tell Sora there was nothing. Then he saw IT was on the far end of the bench, in a deep shadow. It was small and dark. He had missed it. He walked over. He leaned down. It was a stone. A simple, smooth, gray stone. It was the size of his palm. It was not from the ship. It looked like a river rock. A white line like quartz went through it. He picked it up. It was cool and heavy in his hand. He turned it over. He had never seen this stone before in his life. This was not his. This was what he had forgotten. He stared at it. The stars shone behind it. He did not understand. This made no sense. Why would Commander Sora, a fierce draconian, make him come all this way for a rock he did not own? The quiet in the room felt different now. It was not peaceful. It was waiting. He held the stone tight. He looked out at the endless stars, feeling more lost than when he arrived. Jean stood in the silent observation blister. The cold from the clear dome seemed to seep into his bones. He stared at the stone in his hand. It was just a rock. A simple, smooth, gray river stone. The white line through it caught the starlight. It looked like a small, frozen bolt of lightning. He turned it over. His fingers traced its smooth surface. He had no memory of this stone. It was not from his toolkit. It was not from his home. He had never seen it before. Why was it here? Why did Commander Sora think it was his? A bad feeling grew in his stomach. This was not about a forgotten tool. This felt different. The commander's words replayed in his head. You forgot something on my ship. Did Sora think Jean had brought a strange object onto the ship? Was this a security problem? He put the stone in his pocket. It felt heavy against his leg. He would have to go back. He would have to tell Sora he was wrong. This was not Jin's. He would give it back and face whatever came next. He was sure the commander would not like being told they were wrong. He walked to the door. It slid open for him. The empty, Blue-lit hallway felt more lonely than before. He began the long walk back to the lift. His mind was a mess of questions. His memory of last night was clear. He had sat on that bench. He had his flask. He had his slate. The bench was bare when he left. He was sure of it. So where did the stone come from? Who put it there? The lift arrived. He stepped in and pressed the button for the command deck. As the lift moved, he heard a soft sound from the pocket of his jacket. It was a small sound like a tiny tap. He reached in. His fingers touched the stone. It was warm now. He pulled it out. It looked the same, but it was no longer cool. It held the heat from his body. He looked at it closely under the lift's bright light. It was just a stone, but it was a perfect stone. It had no sharp edges. It was not from a quarry. It was from water, a river or maybe a beach. How did a stone from a beach get onto a starship in deep space? The lift stopped. The doors opened to the command deck. The bright lights and quiet talk hit him. Everyone was still at their stations. Commander Sora was not in the center. They were standing by a large screen, looking at a star map. Gene walked toward them. He held the stone in his hand. He stopped a few steps away and waited. Sora did not turn around. Their tail gave one slow, knowing flick. "You have it," they said. Their low voice did not ask a question. "Yes, Commander," Gene said. He held out his hand, showing the stone. "But this is not mine. I did not forget this. I have never seen it before." Sora turned. Their golden eyes looked at the stone in Jin's palm. Then they looked at Jin's face. "It is yours now," Sora said. Their voice was quieter. It was not a command. It sounded like a statement of fact. Gene was confused. He did not lower his hand. "I don't understand." Sora looked past him at the crew on the deck. They were pretending to work, but Gene knew they were listening. Sora's head tilted slightly. "Walk with me, technician." Sora moved toward a side door. It led to a small private viewing room. Gene followed. The door closed behind them. The room was dark, with one large window showing the stars. It was suddenly very quiet. The hum of the ship was just a soft vibration here. They were alone. Sora stood by the window, their large form a dark shape against the starfield. "The ship's internal sensors," Sora began, "are not just for threats. They monitor crew well-being, heart rate, stress signs. Last night, the system flagged the observation blister. A single occupant, elevated stress biomarkers. For many hours." Jin's breath caught. They had been watching, or the machines had. He felt a hot rush of shame. His private moment was not private. "I reviewed the footage," Sora said, still looking at the stars. "Not to spy on your grief, but because a crew member in distress is my concern. A distracted crew member is a risk to my ship." Gene said nothing. His hand closed around the stone. It felt solid and real. "I saw your ritual," Sora continued. Their voice was a deep rumble in the dark. "The digital flame. The words you spoke to the void. The drink you poured on my floor." Sora finally turned their head. A glint of starlight shone in one golden eye. "I will have to clean that." I am sorry, Commander," Gene managed to say. Sora made a soft sound, like a sigh of steam. "Do not be. I understood the purpose. You were placing a marker for your fallen wing brother, Day." Hearing Day's name in the dragon's deep voice was strange. It made his grief feel seen, and suddenly very big in the small room. "My people," Sora said, raising one clawed hand. "We have a custom. When a great one falls, we take a scale. We heat it in fire until it becomes permanent like stone. We place it in a hall of memory. It is a weight, a proof that they existed." Sora's claw touched the window gently. "Your people, you have no scales, but I have learned you use stones. You place them on markers of stone on your world. A sign that says, 'I remember. You are not forgotten.' Is this correct?" Gene nodded slowly. His throat felt tight. "Yes, it is a sign of respect. A visit." Sora turned fully to face him now. "You came to this place with your memory, but you left with only your pain. You had no stone to leave for him. Your marker was incomplete. Jean looked down at the stone in his hand. The truth began to dawn on him, vast and quiet. That, Sora said, looking at Jin's closed fist, is from the shores of a lake on my homeworld. It is smooth from the water of my youth. I have carried it for many cycles. Sora's large eyes met his. It is a good stone, heavy. It will not move in the solar winds of this ship. It will hold your memory in place. Jean was stunned. He opened his hand and looked at the stone. It was not a reprimand. It was a gift. A terrible, kind, perfect gift. This fierce being, this dragon commander, had given him a piece of their own memory so Jean could complete his. You placed it there? Jean asked, his voice rough. Before first light, Sora said simply. So you would find it. Jean could not find any words. He just held the stone. It was the heaviest thing he had ever carried. The commander watched him for a long moment. Then Sora nodded, as if something was settled. Your people, Sora said, turning back to the stars. You carry your dead not in halls, but here. A claw tapped its own chest where a heart would be. It is a weight that would break a weaker species. You bear it and you still function. You still repair my ship. It is a formidable strength. Now, you have your stone. The matter is closed. Sora walked to the door. They paused, their head near the ceiling. And Jean? Clean the soju from my deck plating. Use solvent 9. It is the only thing that works. The door slid open, and Commander Sora was gone. Jean was left alone in the dark with the stars and the warm, smooth weight of the stone in his hand. Jean stood in the dark viewing room for a long time. The only light came from the stars outside the big window. He looked at the stone in his hand. The white line seemed to glow softly. It was real. This had really happened. He thought about Commander Sora's words. You had no stone to leave for him. It was true. Last night, he had left only his tears and his empty flask. He had left nothing solid behind. Nothing to prove day had been remembered in that place. Sora saw that. Sora, a being from another world, saw the empty space in his ritual and filled it. The kindness of it felt huge. It was so large it almost scared him. He was used to small things, quiet work, simple fixes. This was not simple. This was a bridge built across a canyon of biology and culture. And it was built with a single stone. He put the stone back in his pocket. It was warm again. He could feel its weight against his leg. It was a comfort. He left the viewing room and walked back onto the command deck. The crew was still there. They did not look at him, but he felt their attention. He knew they were curious. What had the commander said to the human in private? Was he in trouble? Jean did not look at them. He walked straight to the lift. He needed to be somewhere quiet. He needed to think. The lift doors closed. He leaned against the wall. He let out a long breath. His mind was full of a strange, quiet noise. It was the sound of a world changing its shape. He had always seen Sora as a force of nature, like a storm or a mountain, powerful, unmoving, something to be respected and avoided. Now he saw something else. He saw a being who understood grief, a being who kept a stone from a lake on their homeworld. The lift took him down to the crew decks. These halls were busier. Humans and other species walked past. They talked. They laughed. It was normal life. Felt strange to Jean now. He moved through them like a ghost. He went to the small room he called his own. It was not big. A bed, a desk, a small screen on the wall. He sat on the edge of his bed. He took the stone out of his pocket and placed it on the desk. He looked at it. It was just a rock, but it was also a scale, a memory scale. That's what Sora had given him. A draconian scale made of stone. He thought about his own people. He thought about the graves back home, the neat rows of stones in quiet, green places. His grandmother's grave had a simple marker. Every year, his mother would take him there. They would clean the stone. They would leave a small, smooth pebble on top. It was a way of saying, I was here. I still remember you. He had not been back to Earth in years. He had no grave to visit for Day. Day's body was lost to the vacuum. There was no place to put a stone. So he had carried the memory inside him, a heavy, shapeless thing. Now he had a place, the observation blister. And he had a stone. A soft sound made him look up. His door was open a crack. A face peered in. It was Micha, the medic. She was a small woman with a kind face and sharp eyes. She had patched him up a few times after minor injuries in the machine shops. "Jean?" she said softly. "You okay? People are talking. They said the commander called you out." News traveled fast on a ship. Jean was not surprised. He looked from her face to the stone on his desk. He did not want to talk. But Micha was not just a medic. She was from a city near his hometown. She understood things without words. He nodded toward the stone. Micha pushed the door open and stepped in. She saw the stone. She walked over and looked at it. She did not touch it. "It's a nice stone," she said. Her voice was careful. "It's from Commander Sora," Jean said. The words sounded impossible. Micha's eyes went wide. She looked from the stone to Jin's face. "What?" Jean told her. He kept it simple. He told her about being called to the deck, about being sent to the blister, about finding the stone, about the private talk. He did not tell her about Day. She already knew about Day. Everyone who knew Jean knew that story. When he finished, Micha was silent for a full minute. She stared at the stone. "They gave you a stone from their homeworld?" she finally whispered. "Yes, because you had none for Day." "Yes." Micha put a hand over her mouth. Her eyes got shiny. She shook her head. "Wow," she breathed. "Just wow." She looked at Jean. "Do you know what this means?" Jean shook his head. He was still figuring that out. "It means they see us," Micha said. Her voice was firm now. "They really see us. Not just as workers. Not just as warm bodies to fix pipes. They see our hearts." She pointed at the stone. "That is an act of deep respect. For you. And for Day." Hearing her say it made it more real. Jean looked at the stone again. It was a sign of respect. From a draconian commander. The weight of that honor settled on his shoulders. It was not a heavy weight. It was solid, like a good tool in his hand. "What will you do with it?" Micha asked. "I will take it back," Jean said. The decision was clear as soon as he said it. "To the blister. I will leave it there. For Day." A small smile touched Micha's lips. She nodded. "Good." She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Jean, this is a good thing. For all of us." Then she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. Jean was alone again. He picked up the stone. He held it tight in his hand. He thought about Sora's final order. "Clean the soju from my deck plating." He stood up. First, he would go to the supply closet and get solvent 9. He would clean the spot. He would do it carefully. It was the least he could do. Then, when the ship was quiet again, he would go back to the blister. He had something to leave now. He was no longer just a man with a memory. He was a man with a stone. And that made all the difference. Solvent 9 smelled sharp and clean. Jean poured a little onto a cloth. He knelt on the cold floor of the observation blister. The spot was easy to find. A small, dark patch on the otherwise perfect metal deck plating. He remembered pouring the soju last night. A little for Day. A little for the memory. He rubbed the spot gently with the cloth. The solvent worked fast. The dark patch faded. Then it was gone. The floor was clean again. He sat back on his heels. The job was done. He had followed the commander's order. The stars were bright above him. The purple nebula had turned slightly. It looked like a great, slow-moving wave in the sky. He was alone. The ship was in its quiet cycle again. Most of the crew was sleeping or working in other sections. He put the cloth and the solvent bottle to the side. From his pocket, he took out the stone. It sat in his palm, solid and silent. This was the reason he was here. Not to clean, but to finish what he had started. He walked to the bench. He sat down in the same spot as last night. The metal was cold. He held the stone in both hands. He looked out at the stars. He did not light a digital candle this time. He did not have his flask. He just had the stone and the silence. "Day," he said to the stars. His voice was quiet in the big room. "I have a place for you now." He told the emptiness about the stone. He explained where it came from. He said Commander Sora's name. Felt important to say it, to connect the two beings who would never meet. "It is a good stone," Jean said, repeating Sora's words. "Heavy. It will not move." He smiled a little. "A dragon gave it to me. For you. You would have liked that. You always liked strange and wonderful things." He sat for a while just holding it. He remembered good times. The taste of cold noodles on a hot day. The feeling of laughing until his stomach hurt. The sound of Day trying to sing always off-key. The memories did not bring tears this time. They just were. They existed like the stone in his hand. Finally, he bent down. He placed the stone on the deck plating, right at the foot of the bench. He pressed it down as if planting it. It sat there, dark gray against the pale metal. The white quartz line pointed toward the stars. It looked right. It belonged there. A marker. A proof. He stood up. He looked at the stone for a long time. He felt a peace he had not felt in 5 years. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it had a shape now. It had a place to live outside of his own heart. He left the observation blister. He did not look back. He knew the stone was there. The next morning, the ship's routine continued. Jean went to the machine shop. His job today was to check the power couplings on Deck 7. It was normal work. Simple work. He saw Micha in the mess hall at breakfast. She gave him a small, knowing nod. He nodded back. Nothing else was said. Later, he worked with Tay. Tay was a big man with strong hands. He was good with engines. They were checking a coolant line together. Tay worked quietly for a while. Then he spoke, his eyes on his tools. "I heard about the stone," he said, his voice low. Jean did not look up. He tightened a bolt. "Oh, Micha told me," Tay said. He was not gossiping. He was just stating a fact. "It is a good thing, Jean." "Yes," Jean said. Tay nodded. He understood. He had lost a cousin in the same pirate skirmish that took Day. He knew about carrying weight. They worked in silence again. But it was a comfortable silence. It was the silence of people who shared a similar hurt. In the afternoon, Jean passed by the logistics office. The door was open. He saw Hannah inside. She was at her desk, looking at her screen. She was usually very busy, always typing, always talking on the comm, but now, she was still. On the corner of her desk, next to her screen, was a small framed picture. It was a picture of a man in a uniform. Jean knew it was her older brother. He had died 2 years ago in a training accident. Hannah reached into a drawer. She took out a small, smooth white shell. She placed it carefully in front of the picture frame. She touched the frame once, softly. Then she went back to her work, typing again. Jean kept walking. He did not say anything, but he saw it. The stone was not just for him. It was a reminder. It had reminded Hannah that she could have a marker too, even here on a starship. It was a permission slip, given by a dragon. The story of the stone moved through the human crew. It did not move in shouts or announcements. It moved in quiet words, in nods, in a look across a room. It was not a story about Jean or even about Sora. It was a story about being seen, about having your way of remembering respected by someone so powerful and so different. It changed how some of the humans stood. Their shoulders were a little straighter. They did their work with a little more care. They were not just working for a paycheck or to avoid trouble. They were working for a commander who understood the weight of a stone. Jean felt the change in the air. It was subtle, like a shift in the ship's gravity. He did not talk about it, but he felt it. That evening, he was walking back to his room. He passed a viewport in a quiet hall. Commander Sora was there, standing and looking out. Their hands were clasped behind their back. Their tail was still. Jean stopped. He did not want to interrupt. He began to turn to go another way. "Technician Jean," Sora said without turning around. Jean stopped. "Commander." "The solvent," It worked. Yes, Commander. The deck is clean. Good. Sora was silent for a moment. They still looked at the stars. My second officer tells me the efficiency reports from the human engineering sections have improved. By 2%. This cycle. Jean did not know what to say. That is good, he finally said. It is, Sora rumbled. They turned their head just enough for one golden eye to glance at Jean. A stone is a small thing, but it can steady a foundation. They turned back to the viewport. You may go. Jean walked away. He understood. The stone had done more than mark a memory. It had fixed something. Something on the ship that had been broken silently for a long time. It had given a crew a reason to belong. He reached his room. He lay on his bed in the dark. He did not dream of the vacuum or of tearing metal. For the first time in years, he dreamed of a quiet river and a smooth, gray stone waiting on the bank. A week passed. The ship's routine was like a heartbeat, steady and strong. Jean did his work. He fixed power relays. He calibrated sensors. His hands knew what to do. His mind was quiet. He visited the observation blister once. He did not go at night. He went in the middle of his shift, when the room was empty. He just wanted to see. The stone was there. It sat exactly where he had left it. The pale deck plating was clean around it. No one had moved it. The white line in the stone caught the light from the stars. It looked like it had always been there. A part of the ship. He did not sit. He did not stay long. He just looked. He gave a small nod to the stone and to the memory. Then he left and went back to work. It was enough. The change on the ship was still there. It was in the small things. A human technician would pass a draconian crew member in the hall. Before, they would look down and hurry past. Now, the human might give a short, respectful nod. The draconian would often dip their head in return. It was a small motion, but it was new. Jean saw Commander Sora sometimes from a distance. On the command deck or walking through the hangar bay. The commander moved the same as always. Proud, sure. But Jean thought he saw a slight difference. When Sora spoke to a human crew member, their head tilted just a little more. They listened. Their great golden eyes seemed to take in more than just the words. One day, Jean was in the mess hall. He was eating a simple meal of noodles and vegetables. Micha sat down across from him. She had a bowl of soup. How is the stone? She asked quietly. It is there, Jean said. Good. She took a sip of soup. I saw Hannah in logistics. She has a little shell on her desk now. For her brother. I saw it too, Jean said. Tay told me he wrote a letter to his cousin's family. He had not done that in a year. Micha shook her head slowly. A stone. It is a small thing. But it started something. Jean looked at his food. He felt strange. He had not meant to start anything. He had just been sad. He had just accepted a gift. Do not look so worried, Micha said, smiling a little. It is a good thing. People feel seen. Like they are not just parts of a machine. They are people with pasts. Even here. Jean understood. On a deep space ship, you could forget you were a person. You could become just a job. A function. The stone was a reminder that people had histories. They had loves and losses. And that was okay. It was even respected. Later that same day, Jean had a difficult job. A coolant pipe had a small leak in a tight space. He had to crawl into an access tunnel. It was hot and close. The smell of chemicals was strong. He sealed the leak carefully. He tested the seal twice. It held. As he was backing out of the tunnel, he heard voices. They were outside the maintenance hatch. Just a human story. It does not mean anything. The voice was rough. Jean recognized it. It was a Tarkonian, a species with thick skin and a loud voice. His name was Gore. He worked in heavy cargo. It does mean something, another voice said. This voice was softer. It was human. It was Tay. It means the commander understands respect. Our kind of respect. You put rocks on dead things, Gore said, his voice full of disbelief. It is a waste of a good rock. Jean stayed still in the tunnel. He did not want to interrupt. It is not about the rock. Tay said. His voice was calm but firm. It is about the action. It is about saying, I remember you. Your people burn special oils, yes? To remember your ancestors. There was a silence. Gore made a grumbling sound. Yes, we do. It is the same, Tay said. The commander gave Jean the rock so he could do his version of burning oil. They saw his need and gave him the tool. That is leadership. Another silence. Then Gore spoke again, his voice quieter. The human's wing brother died well. In battle. That is a good death. Yes, Tay said. It was. Humph, Gore said. Jean heard the sound of heavy footsteps walking away. Jean waited a moment. Then he crawled out of the access tunnel. Tay was there, putting his tools away. He saw Jean and raised an eyebrow. You heard? Tay asked. Yes, Jean said, standing up and brushing dust from his clothes. Do not mind Gore, Tay said. He is loud, but he is not bad. He just has to think about things in his own way. Now he is thinking. Tay closed his toolbox. You started a conversation, Jean. In a place where we usually just talk about work and food. Jean did not know what to say to that. He just picked up his own tools. That evening, something unexpected happened. Jean was off duty. He was in a small common room reading on his data slate. A few other crew members were there, talking softly. Commander Sora walked in. The room went completely silent. The commander never came to the small common rooms. They stayed on the command deck or in their own quarters. Sora looked around the room. Their gaze fell on Jean. They walked over. Everyone watched. Jean put his slate down and stood up. Technician, Sora said. Commander, Sora held out a closed hand. My first officer tells me a story. He says the human crew is telling a story about a stone and a memory. He says it improves morale. Sora opened their hand. In their large palm were two small, dark pieces of polished wood. These are from the forests of my homeworld. They are good for remembering, for smoothing worry. Sora placed them on the table next to Jin's slate. Give one to the medic, Micha. She lost a patient last month. It weighs on her. The other, give it to someone you think needs it. Sora did not wait for a response. They turned and left the room. The door slid shut behind them. The room was silent for a long moment. Then everyone looked at the two pieces of wood on the table. They were smooth and dark, with a deep grain. Jean picked them up. They were warm from Sora's hand. He looked at the door where Sora had left. The message was clear. The stone was not the end. It was the beginning. The commander was watching. They were learning. And they were giving the humans the tools to care for each other. He put the pieces of wood in his pocket. He would find Micha first. He knew exactly who needed the second piece. It was a young mechanic named Ji-hoon, who had just gotten news that his mother was sick back on Earth. He had been quiet and sad for days. Jean left the common room. The ship hummed around him, steady as ever. But the air felt different. It felt alive with a new kind of understanding. It was no longer just a ship carrying beings who worked together. It was becoming a place where they could remember together, too. The ship's cycle was ending. The main lights dimmed to a soft blue for the quiet hours. The halls were empty. The only sounds were the distant hum of the engines and the whisper of the air vents. Jean walked through the silent ship. He was not going to his room. He was walking toward Deck Gamma, toward the observation blister. He had something in his pocket. Not the stone from Sora. That was already there, holding its place. This was something else. The door to the blister slid open. The stars were breathtaking as always. The vast, silent blanket of night, dotted with fierce, bright points. The nebula was a deep swirl of violet and indigo. He was not alone. Commander Sora stood by the view, a tall, still silhouette against the starfield. They did not turn. Their tail lay motionless on the floor. Jean stopped just inside the door. He had not expected this. He thought he would be alone. Commander, Jean said softly that Sora's head tilted, just a fraction. Technician. Their voice was a low rumble in the quiet room. You returned to your marker. Yes, Jean said. This is good. Sora still did not look at him. They looked out at the cosmos. A marker should be visited. It is a promise kept. Jean walked further into the room. He did not go to the bench. He went to stand a few paces from Sora, also looking out at the stars. He could feel the heat coming from the Draconian's body. It was a comfortable warmth in the cool air of the blister. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They just stood together in the quiet, bathed in starlight. It was not an awkward silence. It was peaceful. It was the silence of two soldiers who did not need to fill the air with words. Jean looked down at the bench. There was the gray stone with its white line. It looked small and mighty at the same time. It was doing its job. It was holding memory in place. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a new stone. This one was different. It was rougher, not smooth. It was a dark, rusty brown. It was not beautiful like Sora's stone. It was a practical rock. He had carried it since his basic training days. Day had given it to him. They had been on a hike. Day had picked it up and said, "Here, piece of home. For when you are far away." Jean had kept it all these years. He had never known what to do with it. Now he did. He stepped forward. He bent down and placed his rough, brown stone next to Sora's smooth, gray one. They sat side by side at the foot of the bench. One from an alien lake. One from a Korean mountainside. Together on a starship deck. He stood up. He looked at the two stones. His throat felt tight, but it was a good feeling. "A second stone?" Sora asked. They had turned now. Their golden eyes looked at the two rocks on the floor. "The first was for remembering," Jean said, his voice rough. "This one is for thanks. For a friend." He meant it for both Day and for Sora, but he did not say that. He did not need to. Sora made a soft, understanding sound. They took a step closer. They looked at the stones for a long moment. "They are a good pair," Sora said finally. "One for memory, one for gratitude. They will guard each other." Jean nodded. That felt exactly right. They fell into silence again. This time Sora spoke first. They spoke to the stars, their voice thoughtful. "I have commanded many crews. I have valued efficiency, discipline, strength." They glanced at Jean. "I have learned a new kind of strength on this ship. It is the strength to carry a quiet heart. It is a human strength. It is useful." It was high praise from a Draconian. Jean understood. A crew that could carry its grief without breaking was a crew that would not panic. A crew that felt respected would be loyal. Sora was not just being kind. They were recognizing a tactical advantage. But the kindness was still real. "We learned it from you first," Jean said. He meant the gesture, the seeing, the giving of the stone. That Sora's nostrils flared slightly, a sign of amusement or surprise. Perhaps we remind each other of what we already know." Sora turned fully away from the view. They looked at Jean. "The ship is secure for the cycle. My watch is ending." They paused. "I will leave you to yours." They walked toward the door. As they passed Jean, they stopped. A large, clawed hand came up. For a second, Jean thought Sora would place it on his shoulder. They did not. They simply held it there, a gesture of solidarity, not touch. Then they lowered it. "Good night, Technician Jean." "Good night, Commander Sora." The Draconian left. The door slid shut. Jean was alone with the stars and the two stones. He did not sit. He did not stay much longer. He had done what he came to do. He had completed the marker. He had said his thanks. He took one last look. The two stones sat together, small and solid against the immense backdrop of space. They were not much, just rocks, but they were proof. Proof of a friend. Proof of a brother. Proof of an understanding that could cross the void between stars and species. Jean turned and walked to the door. He did not feel heavy anymore. He felt light. The memory had a home now. It lived here in this room between the stones. He could leave it here. He could visit. But he did not have to carry it all by himself anymore. He walked back to his quarters through the sleeping ship. The halls were quiet. The future felt calm. There would be more work tomorrow. More pipes to fix, more systems to check. There might be danger someday. There would always be loss. But there would also be stones, and watchful dragons, and the quiet, formidable strength of human hearts. Remembered and respected. He reached his room. He lay down in the dark. Outside his small window, the stars moved past, steady and endless. For the first time in a very long time, Jean felt not like a visitor in the universe, but like he belonged to it. He closed his eyes, and his sleep was deep and dreamless and still.